What's up, good people, and welcome back to my channel where we bond over our favorite TV shows, trending topics, and everything in between that we care about. So for many people, the American dream is being able to buy your first home and, if you're lucky, even an investment property. However, owning rental property does come with some cons. And one of those cons is if you have the unfortunate experience of allowing a person to move into your property who turns out to be the tenant from hell.
Yeah.
And as I've mentioned before in other videos, thanks to Lipstick Alley, we actually have an account of Darius Crook's evolution of becoming the predator that he is. They have been literally tracking him since 2016 with pretty much daily accounts of his history, his antics, the predatory practices, etc. And occasionally, through this timeline of them archiving all that was Darius Crook's, survivors would chime in here or there with their stories. And so we actually have a written account from one of Darius Crook Williams' former landlords.
That's fine. What law I broke? Well, tell me what rule, what law did I break?
So let's see what they had to say. So this post was from November 13th of 2019. And so this person claims to be the former landlord of Darius Crook's when he lived in New Jersey. So here's an account of their experience with Darius Crook's. They say, "I have not thought about Darius Williams in years." I had that story too. "But he sent me this masterclass email today and I ended up here. I was Darius's landlord during his brief time in Jersey City in 2012. Now remember, and I am going to add my commentary as we go through this, just so you guys aren't bored with just my reading. But mind you, this would be right after he left Chicago running from the Cupcake Gallery scheme, the FreshGO scheme, the lunch machine scam that he pulled on me and his best childhood friend. So this is an account of where he went after this. And just a quick disclaimer, I know that I owe you guys Surviving Darius Crook's Season 2, Episode 2, which starts to lead us into his New York years. However, as I started to put the content together, I realized that we still had some pretty big gaps in those New York years. And so I feel like that part of the series is not quite ready yet. And this here is actually a piece of that I found out about as of last summer, and now it's circulating again. And thanks to the members of the Exposed Darius Crook's Coalition who have been reposting some of these things that are a little older from last summer that many of you who are new to this situation may not have ever seen. So this popped up on my timeline recently, and I was like, you know what, I can just do a video on this alone because, you know, we're covering the survivors, each individual survivor of Darius Crook's as well. And so this would be another survivor. So let's get into this story again. So again, this is the landlord. And so he says that Darius briefly stayed in Jersey City during a time in 2012. And he goes on to say, and we're not talking about corporate landlord. It's one unit above my garage and I live on the premises. So scamming me in particular is a bad look. I gave Darius the benefit of the doubt regarding a number of red flags on his application and credit report, but he seemed like a nice enough guy. And as we see, a lot of people are still being fooled by that nice guy act. And he goes on to say, and his salary at the HR job was sufficient to cover the rent. So I let him have the lease, a decision I later regret. Now, what I find interesting here is he says the salary at the HR job was sufficient enough to cover the rent. However, and this is some of the New York, Surviving Darius Crook's New York stuff. However, I'm gonna sprinkle it in, you know, wherever it fits. And so in this case, it kind of fits. So this guy who was his landlord, who saw check stubs, credit report, all of those things, background, I guess. And so he's saying that the salary was sufficient to cover the rent. He didn't say far exceeded, was more than enough then. And what I find is interesting is that Darius claims during that time he was making 6 figures. And so for someone who lived above a garage of someone's home, I would think that if a person came making 6 figures, he wouldn't, this previous landlord would not have written sufficient enough to cover. To me, that says that salary, which people suspect that the salary wasn't what he claims it to be. Darius knows how to make check stubs. That he definitely knows how to do. So I would never believe any check stub he presents at all. Okay, so let's continue. So this ex-landlord goes on to say, about 6 months into his lease, he wrote 2 bad checks to me. One bounced for insufficient funds, and the other was a stop payment. And this was not a legit stop payment because I lost the check and he was issued a new one. He had fraudulently written me a check and then stopped payment so I would not get paid. I should have reported him to the police at that point and had him arrested. I don't know if you can do that for that, especially bounce some check to your landlord, stop payment. But he goes on to say, but I started the eviction proceedings instead. And so Darius, even at this time, around circa 2012-ish, was no stranger to evictions. By then, by this point alone, he had had at least 2 to 3 evictions. 2 for sure I'm aware of. It could have been 3. And so this is very in line with his pattern. Again, even today, as everything we know with him being a social media influencer, it's a pattern and a scammer and a predator. It's all a pattern. And so even this here was a pattern. But let's continue, because I know the story, so we'll get to the meat in a minute. And so he goes on to say, the one thing that I do appreciate is that he left of his own volition soon thereafter, instead of dragging things on for months, which he totally could have pulled off. And those of us, who are landlords, we do know that, God forbid, if you ever have to go through the eviction process, it really does give a lot of grace to the tenants. And they, depending on where you live, the jurisdiction, they could get anywhere from an extra 3 to 6, 9 months off of you after you file eviction. They definitely ain't paying once they know that you're going through the eviction process. So that really sucks. But the good part is that Darius was on to his next scam, or scamming the next landlord or whatever. So he left this guy's property. And this guy says, I think he was smart enough not to want an eviction to show up in background checks, future credit reports, etc. Now, this I find interesting because he's implying that Darius didn't want it to show up, as if Darius didn't already have them on his record. So this, again, this is all like, I don't know. This is speculation. But was he looking at the previous evictions? Were they even on whatever information Darius gave? Did he give the correct information? Is there multiple identities going on here? What's happening? Because even as of this point, Darius had multiple evictions. I know that personally. So that's interesting that he says he did not want an eviction to show up in the background check, future credit reports, etc. Not an additional, because that's what this would have been, an additional eviction. But again, depends on what identity this property was leased under. Anyway, so let's go on. So then he gives us more. He says he left the apartment a disaster. The door was broken off the built-in microwave, so it had to be completely replaced. How you break a door off a microwave? That's being really heavy-handed. That's more than being heavy-handed. It's probably was totally on purpose. And then he says multiple floor tiles were broken. The place was filthy, etc. I can believe all of this. Keep in mind, for those of you who don't know the backstory of who I am in relations to Darius, I was a very close friend for over a decade. And so I was around when he was evicted from, again, I can remember 2 off the top of my head. And so I remember helping him move at least twice. And I remember trying to clean up behind him as he was moving, because he was one of the mindset of, I only take what I want to take to my new place. Everything else is on that landlord to clean up, to get rid of, whether it was dishes, odds and ends, literally furniture. I don't want that living room set anymore. It stays here, and this, nobody else would probably want it either. Tables, whatever it was, chairs, just left it. And I'm like, you're supposed to empty the apartment. So I guarantee you, he never got security deposits back, guaranteed. And then, not only leaving things, but the filth. He's never been a clean person. That's been stated, by other people, other employees and things of that nature. So the way that he ran his restaurants and constantly failed inspections and stuff, that's how he is. And people have seen his unsanitary, habits when cooking even online on camera. And so that's real life. That part of him is real life. A lot of the other stuff ain't. But that part of him is real life. He can't hide that he's filthy. So I'm not surprised by this in the least. This, again, is the pattern that Darius Crooks has and has always had. So let's see what else he says. And then he goes on to say the repairs ran more than $300 past the amount of his 1.5 month deposit. Through a lot of hard work, including calling his bank every day for weeks and having to open my own account at his bank, I was able to get the bounce check paid. But he never replaced the stop payment one, including the previously mentioned excess repair costs. He still owes me over $1,550. I know this ex-landlord still ain't got that back. So this was something that happened in 2012 to this landlord. He was posting in 2019, and as of 2019, he still had not received his $1,550. We're in 2022 now, and I'm sure this is still the case. We haven't had any updates from him, but let's close this out. His last paragraph says, I never expected to get paid. Although if he was really building 7-figure brands per his Instagram profile and making 5 figures per live stream per his email today, then cutting me a low 4-figure check with an apology would be a no-brainer. Yeah, but that's what honorable people do. He's not honorable. So then he goes on to say, I always suspected that he left a line of ripped off folks in Chicago, and his cell phone bill addressed to the Cupcake Gallery, later Uptown Pies, kept coming to my address for years. But we're all lying. We're all lying. We're all haters. Oh, Jesus. Okay, so he says, sad to see he's still behaving in this way, but at least some people are talking about it, and maybe his next potential landlord or business partner or vendor or anyone will see all these stories and not get involved with him. Again, this was as of 2019. We're in 2020, and I'm sorry, we're in 2022, 3 years later. And there are still people walking into the slaughterhouse as it pertains to Darius Crooks. I don't know what else to say. Again, this does not dissuade me in the least to have all the, I ain't gonna say all, but the few, people who are still following him blindly and, walking into the slaughterhouse and the lion's den and, those, trolls here or there in the comments and other places. It doesn't dissuade me in the least. I'm going to keep exposing. I'm going to keep amplifying voices of people like this, guy who is a landlord, again, trying to make an honest living. He has expenses and bills, and then he has a tenant that is not only not paying rent, but then destroys his property and makes it where he has to put more money into it once he leaves. But again, this is Darius. This, I don't have to say that. I wasn't around for that. But as far as his behavior and the pattern of this sort of thing that this landlord is describing, I have witnessed it personally. So I don't have to say allegedly. And I will never say allegedly for things I know for a fact. So that's pretty much it with this. I wanted to share this, amplify another voice, because I know many people have not heard this story. And I feel that even if this landlord never sees his $1,550, at least having his story amplified and potentially, as he's saying, prevent other people from getting involved with him may be consolation enough, at least for the time being. So with that, if you've made it to this point in the video, please hit that like button to help this channel grow. And if you're not a subscriber, this would be a great time to hit that subscribe button below and that notification bell to join one of the most evolved and exposing subscriber families in these YouTube streets. There's so much more to come, and not just about, Darius Crooks, because coming up in the next couple videos will definitely be another infamous social media influencer who is known as Alex V. Miller, who has scammed his followers out of $9 million. And I can't wait to tell you guys this story. And that rabbit hole goes deep too. So with that, until next time, until I upload another video, including the one about Alex V. Miller, make sure to take care and be blessed. Peace.
supposed to. Watch out for the people that ain't close to. Speak a little something you could toast to. I ain't tryna hear about what you won't do. Moving like I'm into. Hit the ground running like the rent do. Speak a little something that you're into. I ain't tryna hear about what you been through. Like hold up, say what's the hold up. I got the pack, who got the roll up? I'm tryna pull up. It seem like every time I show up, it gotta go up. See the drip, they see the glow up. Oh, now they know us. See, it's funny how my pockets out of shape, but I'm fit for the flex. Clear the phone call, hit my chick with a text. Parlay through the bird with my drip from the jets. Save a couple hundred by your with the rest.